The transport ship descended through the artificial atmosphere of Station Harmony, and Ji-ho Kim pressed his face against the window. The station was massive, larger than anything he had ever seen. It stretched across the darkness of space like a small city, with lights blinking from thousands of windows. This was the Interstellar Military Academy, the most prestigious training facility in the known galaxy. And somehow, impossibly, Ji-ho had been accepted. He was the first human to ever walk through those doors. The docking bay was crowded with cadets from dozens of different species. Ji-ho stepped off the transport and immediately felt out of place. A towering creature with 6 arms and crystalline skin walked past him without a glance. 2 insectoid beings clicked and chittered to each other in a language that sounded like breaking glass. A group of reptilian cadets stood in formation, their scales gleaming under the station lights. Ji-ho adjusted his uniform and tried not to stare. Earth had only made contact with the galactic community 5 years ago. Before that, humanity thought they were alone in the universe. Now Ji-ho stood among beings that his ancestors would have called gods or monsters. A sharp voice cut through the noise. "Cadet Kim, I presume?" Ji-ho turned to see a massive reptilian creature standing before him. The alien was easily 8 feet tall, with dark red scales and eyes that looked like pools of liquid gold. 3 claws extended from each hand, and when the creature spoke, Ji-ho could see rows of sharp teeth. "Yes, sir," Ji-ho said, snapping to attention. "I am Instructor Vorn. I will be overseeing your training." The alien's eyes narrowed as he studied Ji-ho. "You are smaller than I expected. Your species profile indicated you would be at least 6 feet in height. I'm 5'9", sir. That's average for a human male." Instructor Vorn made a sound that might have been disapproval. "The medical team will need to examine you before you begin training. Your species is new to us, and we must ensure the facility can accommodate your needs. Follow me." The medical bay was sterile and white, filled with equipment that Ji-ho did not recognize. A doctor with blue skin and 4 eyes gestured for him to lie on an examination table. Scanners hummed and beeped as they passed over his body. "Fascinating," the doctor murmured. "Single heart, bilateral symmetry, endoskeleton structure. No redundant organs at all. No natural armor plating. Skin is remarkably thin." The doctor looked at Instructor Vorn. "This species is quite fragile. Are you certain he should participate in standard training?" "Those were the terms of the exchange program," Vorn replied. "Earth wants their people trained alongside the best. We will see if they can handle it." Ji-ho said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He had not come across the galaxy to be treated like he was made of glass. The dormitory was another shock. His roommate was already there, a cadet named Talon from a species called the Vraxians. Talon looked like a praying mantis if a praying mantis stood 7 feet tall and had armor plating. The alien turned as Ji-ho entered, and 4 eyes regarded him with what might have been curiosity. "You are the human," Talon said. His voice was surprisingly soft, almost musical. "I have read about your species. You have no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no enhanced strength. How did your people survive on your planet?" "We used our brains," Ji-ho replied, setting his bag on the empty bunk. "Tools. Teamwork. We outsmarted everything that tried to kill us." Talon's head tilted in a gesture that might have been respect. "Clever. But this is not Earth. Here you will face challenges that cannot be outsmarted. I hope you are prepared." The first week was brutal. Physical training revealed what the medical scans had already shown. Compared to other species, humans were painfully average. Ji-ho could not run as fast as Talon. He could not lift as much as the Keltorian cadets. His reflexes were slower, his endurance lower, his body more vulnerable to injury. The other cadets were not cruel, but they watched him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. He was the alien here, the outsider, the weak one who did not belong. On the 5th day, Ji-ho met Yeri Park in the station's research division. She was a human scientist, one of 3 humans on the entire station. She smiled when she saw him, and for the first time since arriving, Ji-ho felt a sense of relief. "How are you holding up?" she asked, offering him a cup of coffee. "Real coffee, imported from Earth at enormous expense. I'm managing," Ji-ho said. "Barely," Yeri nodded. "They don't understand us yet. They look at the scans and see fragility. They don't see what makes humans dangerous." "And what's that?" "We don't know when to quit." Yeri's smile turned sharp. "Every other species in this galaxy evolved with natural advantages. They're stronger, faster, more resilient. They never had to push beyond their limits because their limits were already so high. But humans? We spent millions of years surviving against creatures that should have eaten us. We learned to keep going when every instinct screamed at us to stop. Jiho thought about that as he returned to training. The next day, Instructor Vorn announced the first major test. It was called the Gauntlet, a combat simulation designed to push cadets to their breaking point. It had a 15% injury rate, and it had never been attempted by a human. "Cadet Kim," Vorn said, his golden eyes fixed on Jiho. "You are not required to participate. This exercise may be beyond your species' capabilities." Every eye in the room turned to Jiho. He could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken assumption that he would back down, that he would prove them right about humanity's weakness. Jiho met Vorn's gaze without flinching. "I'll participate, sir." A ripple of surprise went through the assembled cadets. Talon leaned closer to Jiho and spoke quietly. "Are you certain?" "I have completed the gauntlet twice. It is not designed for species like yours." "I'm certain," Jiho said. That night he lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would enter the gauntlet. Tomorrow he would show them what a human could do. He thought about Hieri's words, about humanity's greatest strength. They did not know when to quit. Jiho closed his eyes and hoped that would be enough. The simulation chamber was enormous, large enough to contain entire buildings and artificial terrain. Jiho stood at the entrance with 9 other cadets, each from a different species. They wore combat armor and carried weapons loaded with simulation rounds that hurt like hell but would not kill. Probably, Instructor Vorn addressed them from the observation deck above. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The gauntlet is designed to test your ability to survive in hostile conditions. You will face enemy combatants, environmental hazards, and live obstacles. The simulation will push you to your limits. If you are injured beyond safe parameters, you will be extracted immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," the cadets shouted in unison. "Then begin." The chamber came alive. Walls rose from the floor, creating a maze of corridors and rooms. Lights flickered and died, plunging sections into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, Jiho heard the sound of weapons fire. Talon moved beside him, his 4 eyes scanning the environment. "Stay close to me, Jiho. I will watch for threats." Mira, a Keltorian cadet with blue amphibious skin, nodded in agreement. "Humans have poor night vision, yes? I can guide us through the dark sections." Jiho appreciated their concern, but part of him bristled at being treated like he needed protection. Still, he was not stupid. He would take any advantage he could get. They moved through the first section without incident, working as a team to clear rooms and neutralize holographic enemies. Jiho's aim was steady, and he managed to take down 3 targets before they reached the next area. Then everything went wrong. An explosion tore through the corridor ahead. The blast was real, not simulated. Jiho felt the wave of heat and force slam into him like a physical wall. His armor absorbed some of the impact, but not enough. He was thrown backward, his body smashing into a concrete wall. Pain exploded through his chest. He could not breathe. Something was wrong, very wrong. He tried to move and felt a grinding sensation in his rib cage. Broken ribs. At least 2, maybe 3. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Talon shouting, "Jiho is down! Jiho is down!" In the observation deck, alarms were screaming. Medical monitors showed Jiho's vital signs crashing. His heart rate was erratic. Internal bleeding detected. Severe trauma to the thoracic cavity. Instructor Vorn lunged forward, his claws slamming on the emergency stop button. "Extract him now," Vorn roared. Medical teams mobilized, rushing toward the chamber entrance. In the viewing gallery, Hieri stood with her hands pressed against the glass, her face pale. She watched the monitors in horror as Jiho's readings continued to deteriorate. "He needs immediate surgery," one of the medical staff said. "Those injuries are catastrophic for a human." On the ground, Jiho lay motionless. His vision was blurred, and every breath felt like knives in his chest. He could taste blood in his mouth. Part of his mind knew he should stay down, knew he should wait for help, but another part, a deeper part, refused to accept that. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "A Kim does not quit, ever." Jiho's hand twitched. His fingers dug into the concrete floor. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he forced himself to move. In the observation deck, someone gasped. "He's moving." That's impossible, the medical officer said, staring at the monitors. His injuries should have incapacitated him completely. Jiho's eyes snapped open. The world was pain and fire and darkness, but he could see. He could move. His body was pumping adrenaline through his system, temporarily overriding the damage, suppressing the agony. It was a survival mechanism, an evolutionary trait that had kept his ancestors alive when wounded by predators. He would not stay down. Jiho grabbed his rifle and used it as a crutch, forcing himself to his feet. His left leg buckled, probably fractured, but he locked his knee and put weight on it anyway. Blood ran down his face from a cut somewhere on his scalp. His vision swam, but he blinked it clear. Talon and Mira stared at him in horror. "Jiho, you cannot," Mira whispered. "You are too injured." "I can finish," Jiho said through gritted teeth. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper, but it was steady. In the observation deck, chaos erupted. Instructors shouted at each other. Medical staff argued about whether to force an extraction. Harry was yelling something about human physiology, about adrenaline and shock response. But no one was listening. Instructor Vorn stood frozen, his golden eyes wide with something that might have been disbelief. "What is he doing?" Vorn said quietly. "He should be unconscious." "Humans don't work like other species," Harry said, her voice cutting through the noise. "When we're critically injured, our bodies can temporarily suppress pain and override normal limitations. It's called an adrenaline response. It's how our ancestors survived when wounded by predators. We keep moving because stopping meant death." "That is not survival," one of the other instructors said. "That is madness." Harry met his eyes. "For humans, they're often the same thing." In the chamber, Jiho began to move forward. Each step was agony. His broken ribs ground against each other. His fractured leg threatened to give out with every movement. But he did not stop. He raised his rifle and fired at a holographic enemy, the recoil sending fresh waves of pain through his chest. "Target down." He limped forward, using walls for support. Talon and Mira followed him, too shocked to do anything else. They cleared another room, then another. Jiho's hands were shaking now, and his vision was narrowing. He knew he was running on borrowed time. The adrenaline would not last forever. His body was failing, but he was close. So close, the final objective was 100 meters away. Jiho could see it through the haze of pain, a glowing marker at the end of the corridor. He pushed off from the wall and stumbled forward. His leg gave out and he fell to one knee. "Jiho, please," Mira said, her voice breaking. "You have done enough." Jiho shook his head. He dropped his rifle and began to crawl. His armor scraped against the concrete. Blood dripped onto the floor beneath him. Every meter was a battle, every breath a victory. In the observation deck, no one spoke. They watched in silence as the human dragged himself across the floor, broken and bleeding, refusing to stop. 50 meters. 20. 10. Jiho's hand reached out and touched the objective marker. A bell chimed, indicating completion. He had finished the gauntlet. Then his strength gave out and he collapsed onto the floor. Medical teams swarmed him within seconds, stabilizing his injuries and rushing him to the medical bay. Instructor Vorn stood in the observation deck, staring at the blood trail Jiho had left on the floor. "What are these humans?" Vorn said quietly. Jiho woke 3 days later in the medical bay. The ceiling was white and sterile, and machines beeped softly around him. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his chest. "Do not move," a voice said. Harry appeared beside his bed, her face a mixture of relief and anger. "You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured tibia, internal bruising, and a concussion. The doctors had to put you in a medical coma to let your body heal." "Did I pass?" Jiho asked, his voice hoarse. Harry stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Yes, you idiot." "You passed. You also traumatized half the academy staff and became a viral sensation across the station network. Everyone is talking about the human who refused to die." "Good," Jiho said, then closed his eyes as exhaustion pulled him back toward sleep. Outside the medical bay, the academy was in turmoil. What Jiho had done should have been impossible. The medical staff had reviewed his scans dozens of times, trying to understand how he had continued moving with those injuries. The answer lay in human biology, but that answer frightened them. Instructor Vorn called a meeting with the academy's senior staff. In the conference room, Holographic displays showed footage of Jiho's completion of the gauntlet. The room was silent as they watched the human drag himself across the floor, broken and bleeding. "This is not normal," one of the instructors said. She was a Keltorian, with smooth blue skin and large eyes. His species should not be capable of this level of pain tolerance. Yeri had been invited to the meeting as the station's human expert. She stood and activated her own presentation. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on Earth. We did not have claws or venom or natural armor. What we had was endurance and the ability to keep moving when injured. Our bodies produce chemicals called endorphins and adrenaline that temporarily suppress pain and enhance strength. The holographic display showed human anatomy, highlighting the adrenal glands and nervous system. When a human is critically injured, their body enters a state called fight or flight. Their heart rate increases, pain sensitivity decreases, and blood flow redirects to essential muscles. This allowed our ancestors to escape predators even when wounded. But he was not escaping, Vorn said. He was continuing forward toward the objective. That is not a survival instinct. That is something else. Yeri nodded slowly. You're right. It's something we call determination or stubbornness. Humans have a psychological trait that allows us to override even our survival instincts. We can choose to keep going when our bodies are telling us to stop. It's not always rational, but it's part of what makes us human. The room fell silent. Finally, one of the instructors spoke. On my world, we have legends of warriors who could ignore pain. We thought they were myths. For humans, it's biology, Hieri said quietly. Word spread quickly through the academy. The alien cadets had thought humans were weak, fragile creatures that needed protection. Now they were not so sure. They began researching Earth's history and found things that disturbed them. Talon sat in the library with Mira, scrolling through human military records. His 4 eyes widened as he read. Mira, look at this. During Earth's Second World War, a human soldier named Lakiman Gurung fought off 200 enemy soldiers alone after losing his right hand to a grenade. He used his left hand to fire his weapon and refused to retreat even when wounded multiple times. Mira pulled up another record. Here is another. A human named Roy Benavides was shot multiple times, bayoneted, and had his jaw broken. He continued fighting for 6 hours and saved 8 of his comrades. The medical examiner initially declared him dead, but he spit in the examiner's face to prove he was still alive. This cannot be normal, Talon said. It is for them, Mira replied. Look at their cultural stories. Every human civilization has legends of people who refused to surrender, who fought until their last breath, who won through sheer determination. They celebrate this behavior. They teach it to their children. Talon set down his tablet and looked toward the medical bay where Jiho was recovering. We thought they were weak, but they are not weak. They are terrifying. In the medical bay, Jiho received his first visitor besides Hyeri. Instructor Vorn entered the room, his massive frame barely fitting through the doorway. The reptilian alien approached Jiho's bed and studied him with those golden eyes. The Academy leadership has debated what to do with you, Vorn said. Some believe you should be expelled for reckless behavior. Others think you should be commended for completing the gauntlet under extreme duress. And what do you think, sir? Jiho asked. Vorn was quiet for a long moment. I think I underestimated your species. When I saw your medical scans, I assumed humans were fragile. I was wrong. You are not fragile. You are simply built differently. He paused. Tell me, Cadet Kim, is what you did normal for humans? Jiho considered the question. Not normal, sir, but not unheard of. Humans have always had this ability to push beyond what should be possible. We have stories about it, legends, history. When everything is on the line, when we have nothing left, we find a way to keep going. Sometimes it's stupid. Sometimes it gets us killed. But sometimes it's the only reason we survive. Vorn nodded slowly. Your species evolved in a dangerous world. You learned to refuse defeat because acceptance meant extinction. Something like that, sir. The instructor turned to leave, then paused at the door. The other cadets are frightened of you now, Cadet Kim. They look at you and see something that should not be possible. I suggest you use that fear wisely. After Vorn left, Jiho lay back in his bed and stared at the ceiling. He had not meant to scare anyone. He had just wanted to prove that humans belonged here, that they were not weak. But maybe Vorn was right. Maybe humans were not weak at all. Maybe they were something else entirely. Outside his window, the stars of the galaxy glittered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, more humans were coming. More people who did not know when to quit, who refused to accept defeat, who would get back up no matter how hard they were hit. The galaxy was not ready for humanity. But ready or not, they were here. 2 weeks after the Gauntlet incident, Jiho was cleared to return to training. He expected things to go back to normal, but nothing was normal anymore. When he walked into the training hall, conversation stopped. Cadets turned to look at him, and in their alien eyes he saw something new. Not pity, not curiosity. Fear. Talon approached him cautiously, as if Jiho might suddenly do something unpredictable. "It is good to see you recovered," the Vraxian said. "We were concerned." "I'm fine," Jiho replied, ready to get back to work. But the other cadets kept their distance. During sparring exercises, no one wanted to be paired with him. In the cafeteria, an empty space formed around wherever he sat. Jiho tried to ignore it, but the isolation stung. Hieri found him sitting alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. She sat down beside him without asking. "They're afraid of you," she said simply. "I noticed. Can you blame them? You did something that violated everything they understand about biology and survival instincts. To them, you're not brave. You're aberrant." Jiho turned to look at her. "Is that what we are? Aberrant?" Hieri smiled sadly. "Maybe. Every other species in this galaxy evolved with natural advantages. They're stronger, faster, have redundant organs or natural weapons. They never had to develop our particular brand of insanity, because they never needed it. But humans, we spent our entire evolutionary history being outmatched by everything around us, so we learned to do the impossible. We learned to keep going when every logical instinct said to stop. And that makes us monsters to them." "No," Hieri said. "It makes you something they don't have a category for. Give them time." But time did not make things easier. It made them worse. 3 days later, a second human cadet arrived at the academy. His name was Minho Choi, and he was assigned to the Advanced Space Combat Training Program. Jiho met him briefly before his first exercise, a zero-gravity combat simulation in vacuum conditions. "I heard about what you did," Minho said, grinning. "The whole academy is talking about the human who wouldn't stay down. That's some reputation to live up to." "Don't try to live up to it," Jiho warned. "Just focus on completing your training safely." Minho laughed. "Safe? Where's the fun in that?" The next day, Jiho was in the observation gallery when alarms began shrieking through the station. On the screens, he saw Minho's training simulation had gone catastrophically wrong. His suit had suffered explosive decompression, a mechanical failure that should have killed him within seconds. But Minho did not die. The cameras showed him holding his breath, his face turning red then purple as the vacuum tried to pull the air from his lungs. Any other species would have panicked, would have gasped reflexively and died. But humans had trained themselves to hold their breath, to suppress that desperate need to inhale. Minho kept his mouth clamped shut and used his suit's emergency thrusters to reach the airlock. 20 seconds, 30, 45. When the airlock door sealed behind him and atmosphere flooded back, Minho collapsed. Medical teams found him with burst blood vessels in his eyes, severe internal damage, and partial lung collapse, but he was alive. Jiho stood frozen in the observation gallery, surrounded by stunned alien cadets. He heard one of them whisper, "They're all like this. All of them." That night, the Academy's network exploded with discussion. 2 incidents. 2 humans. 2 impossible survivals. The pattern was undeniable. This was not an anomaly. This was what humans were. Instructor Vorn called Jiho to his office. The reptilian sat behind his desk, his claws tapping thoughtfully on the surface. "Sit, Cadet Kim." Jiho sat. "I need you to explain something to me," Vorn said. "I have been researching your species' history. Military records, survival stories, cultural documents. What I found disturbs me." He activated a holographic display. Images appeared showing human soldiers throughout history. "These are your warriors. In every era, in every conflict, they demonstrate the same pattern. They fight while mortally wounded. They refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. They perform actions that should be impossible." Vorn's golden eyes fixed on Jiho. "Is this trained behavior, or is this inherent to your species?" "Both," Jiho said carefully. "We have the biological capability for it. The adrenaline, the pain suppression, the ability to override our survival instincts. But we also celebrate it culturally. We tell stories about people who never gave up. We teach our children that quitting is worse than dying. We make heroes out of people who stood their ground against impossible odds. That is insane, Vorn said flatly. Maybe, Jiho admitted, but it kept us alive. Earth was not a kind planet. We were prey animals for most of our evolution. We survived by being too stubborn to die. Vorn leaned back in his chair. Do you know what the other species call you now? They have a phrase. Humans are persistence predators. They do not mean just physical persistence. They mean psychological. You are creatures that cannot accept defeat, even when defeat is the logical choice. Is that a problem, sir? I do not know yet, Vorn said. But I will tell you this. The galaxy has never encountered a species like yours. We are accustomed to understanding each other, to predicting behavior based on logical self-interest and survival instinct. But humans violate those assumptions. You make choices that prioritize abstract concepts like honor and determination over your own survival. That makes you unpredictable. And unpredictable things are dangerous, Jiho said nothing. What could he say? Vorn was right. The instructor stood and walked to the window looking out at the stars. There is a phrase in my language. It translates roughly to the prey that kills the hunter. It refers to creatures that should be weak but are so vicious, so relentless, that they become threats anyway. I am beginning to think humans are exactly that. We don't want to be threats, sir. We just want to survive. That is what concerns me, Vorn said quietly, because I am beginning to understand that humans will do anything to survive. Anything at all. When Jiho returned to the dormitory, he found Talon waiting for him. The Vraxian's 4 eyes were solemn. I need to tell you something, Talon said. Some of the cadets have been talking. They believe humans are dangerous. They want the Academy to restrict human participation in training exercises. Because we won't die when we're supposed to. Because you cannot be predicted. Because you violate every assumption we have about behavior and survival. We thought we understood courage, understood determination. But what you and Minho demonstrated was not courage. It was something else. Something we do not have a word for. Jiho sat down heavily on his bunk. What do you think, Talon? Am I dangerous? The Vraxian was quiet for a long time. Yes, he finally said, but not in the way they fear. You are dangerous because you prove that limits can be exceeded, that impossible things can be accomplished through will alone. That is a dangerous idea, Jiho. It challenges everything we believe about the universe. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe, Talon agreed. Or maybe it will start a war. The final exercise came 6 months after Jiho first arrived at the Academy. It was called the Long Night, a multi-day survival scenario on a barren moon orbiting a gas giant. Teams of 5 cadets would be dropped onto the surface with minimal supplies and would have to survive for 72 hours while completing various objectives. It was the ultimate test of teamwork, endurance, and adaptability. Jiho was assigned to a team with Talon, Mira, and 2 other cadets he barely knew. A Grexian named Kosh, built like a boulder with gray stone-like skin, and a Felnari named Lissa, who resembled a bipedal cat with silver fur and sharp claws. The tension was obvious from the start. Kosh and Lissa kept glancing at Jiho with obvious discomfort. I will say this once, Kosh rumbled as they prepared for deployment. If you do something reckless, human, I will not risk myself to save you. Fair enough, Jiho replied evenly. The dropship deposited them on the moon's surface in a region of jagged mountains and deep valleys. The atmosphere was thin but breathable, and the temperature fluctuated wildly between day and night. Their first objective was 12 kilometers away, a communications relay they needed to activate. The team moved efficiently, each member using their natural abilities. Talon's incredible speed let him scout ahead. Mira's amphibious nature meant she could navigate the ice-choked streams. Kosh's strength cleared obstacles. Lissa's agility let her climb vertical surfaces. And Jiho provided tactical coordination, reading maps and planning routes. For the first day, everything went smoothly. They completed 3 objectives and made camp in a sheltered cave as night fell. The temperature dropped to -40 degrees, but their suits kept them warm. On the second day, disaster struck. They were crossing a narrow mountain pass when the ground began to shake. Rockslide. Millions of tons of stone began cascading down the mountainside, and the team scattered. Jiho ran for cover, but the rocks were faster. He felt the ground disappear beneath his feet as he fell, tumbling down into darkness. He woke up in complete blackness, surrounded by the sound of dripping water. Pain radiated from his left arm, and when he tried to move it, the bone ground together. Broken. Again. His ribs ached, probably bruised from the fall. He activated his suit's emergency light and found himself in an underground cave system. "Team, this is Jiho," he said into his comm. Static. He was too deep for the signal to reach the surface. He began exploring, looking for a way out. The caves twisted and turned, a labyrinth of stone tunnels that went on for kilometers. Hours passed. His suit's oxygen supply began to dwindle. He had perhaps 6 hours of air remaining. Then he heard voices, faint, echoing through the stone. He followed them and found his team in a massive cavern, sealed in by the rock slide. They were alive but trapped. "Jiho," Mira rushed forward. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet," Jiho said, then immediately regretted the joke when he saw their faces. Talon was already working on calculations. "We have a problem. This cavern is sealed. Our combined oxygen supplies will last approximately 18 hours. The rescue team will not reach us for at least 30 hours. Silence fell over the group. The math was simple and brutal. They were all going to die. Kosh slammed his fist into the wall. "We must try to dig out. Use explosives to blast through the rockfall." "That could cause another collapse," Mira said. "We would be buried alive." "Then what do you suggest?" Lysa hissed. "We sit here and suffocate?" Jiho's mind raced. 18 hours of oxygen. 5 people. 30 hours until rescue. The numbers did not work. "Unless I have an idea," he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "You all go into emergency stasis. Your suits have medical coma functions that slow your metabolism and reduce oxygen consumption. If all 4 of you go into stasis, the oxygen will last long enough for the rescue team to reach us." "And what about you?" Talon asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. "I stay awake. I keep the distress beacon active and monitor for the rescue team." "I'll be fine." "You will not be fine," Mira said, her voice sharp. "If we take most of the oxygen, you will have perhaps 8 hours of air. The rescue will not arrive for 30. The mathematics are simple. You will die." "Maybe," Jiho said. "But humans are good at not dying when we're supposed to. I'll take those odds." "This is madness," Kosh said. "You are asking us to let you sacrifice yourself. I'm asking you to trust me, and to survive." Talon stepped forward, his 4 eyes fixed on Jiho. "Why? Why would you do this?" Jiho thought about how to answer. He thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of survival against impossible odds. He thought about all the people who had refused to quit, who had given everything so that others could live. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We don't leave people behind, even if it costs us everything." The team argued for 20 minutes, but Jiho would not budge. Finally, with oxygen levels dropping, they agreed. One by one, they activated their suit's medical functions. Mira went first, her eyes closing as the drugs took effect. Then Lysa, then Kosh. Talon was last. He gripped Jiho's good arm. "If you die, human, I will never forgive you." "I'll keep that in mind," Jiho said, managing a smile. Then he was alone in the darkness. The first few hours were not too bad. Jiho kept himself busy maintaining the distress beacon and monitoring the team's vital signs. He talked to himself, recited poems and songs from Earth, anything to keep his mind occupied. Hour 5. Oxygen at 60%. His breathing was still easy. Hour 8. Oxygen at 40%. He began to feel lightheaded. Hour 12. Oxygen at 15%. Every breath was a struggle. His vision blurred. His thoughts became sluggish. Hour 15. Oxygen at 5%. He should have been unconscious. Should have been dead. But he kept his eyes open, kept his breathing steady, kept his hand on the beacon controls. The human body was not designed to function in these conditions. But Jiho's body was running on something beyond biology now. It was running on pure determination, on the stubborn refusal to quit that had defined his species for millions of years. Hour 20. Oxygen at 1%. The world was gray and distant. Jiho could barely remember where he was or why. But his hand stayed on the beacon. Hour 31. The rescue team broke through. They found Jiho slumped against the wall, barely breathing, brain damage imminent from oxygen deprivation. But his hand was still on the beacon, still signaling, still fighting. The medical team stabilized him immediately, flooding his system with oxygen and medications. His teammates were revived from stasis, all healthy and intact, because one human had refused to die. 2 weeks later, Jiho stood in the Academy's main auditorium alongside his teammates. They were graduating with honors. Instructor Vorn stood before them, his golden eyes moving from face to face. "This class has taught us much," Vorn said. "We have learned that strength comes in many forms, that survival is not just about physical power, that courage means different things to different species." His gaze settled on Jiho. "And we have learned that some species simply refuse to accept defeat, even when defeat seems certain." The auditorium erupted in applause. Jiho saw respect in the eyes of the alien cadets now. Not fear, respect. After the ceremony, Talon found him. "I told you before that humans were terrifying. I was wrong. You are not terrifying. You're inspiring." "How so?" "Because you prove that limits are not fixed. That impossible is just a word. Every species in this galaxy accepts their limitations. But humans? You simply refuse to acknowledge that limits exist. And that changes everything." Jiho looked out the window at the stars. More human ships were arriving at the station. More people from Earth, coming to take their place among the galactic community. He thought about what they would bring with them. Not just technology or knowledge, but something else. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The absolute, stubborn, irrational refusal to give up. "The galaxy's going to have to get used to us," Jiho said. "Yes," Talon agreed. "I suspect they will, whether they like it or not." Instructor Vorn watched from the observation deck as the new human cadets disembarked from their transport. They looked small and fragile, just as Jiho had when he first arrived. But Vorn knew better now. He knew what those fragile bodies could accomplish when pushed to their limits. He thought about the phrase from his language, "the prey that kills the hunter," but that was not quite right. Humans were not prey. They were something the galaxy had no word for. They were survivors in the truest sense. Creatures that would endure anything, overcome anything, refuse anything that tried to stop them. The galaxy was not ready for humanity, but it was too late now. They were here, and they were never going to quit.